But for you...
1985 is usually remembered for the movies that completely dominated pop culture. Big studio releases, famous sequels, and crowd-pleasing hits ended up defining the year. But underneath those major titles was another layer of movies that quietly slipped past most audiences. Some were difficult to market. Some leaned into unusual ideas.
I'll be no man's slave and no man's whore. And if I can't kill them all by the gods, they'll know I've tried.
Others simply arrived at the wrong time. That doesn't mean they disappeared entirely. These are the 1985 films that lived slightly outside the spotlight, but still managed to leave an impression on people who eventually found them. Tomboy centered around car culture, teenage rivalry, and identity, following a young woman who disguises herself in order to compete against local racers.
No way.
Where are you going?
To get experience.
The movie leaned heavily into the style and energy of mid-1980s youth films, mixing comedy, romance, and street racing elements into a very specific time capsule of the era. It didn't receive major attention during release, but its setting and atmosphere gave it a distinct identity.
Here, put this on.
Thanks.
The cars, fashion, music, and overall tone locked it firmly into the culture of that period. What makes it interesting now is how directly it reflects the smaller, lower-budget side of 1980s entertainment, the kind of movie that wasn't trying to become a blockbuster, but still created its own personality. And decades later, those are often the movies people feel like they discovered for themselves. Enemy Mine combined science fiction with survival drama, focusing on two soldiers from opposite sides of an interstellar war who become stranded together on a hostile planet. At first, the setup feels familiar, enemies forced into cooperation, but the movie gradually shifts into something more reflective, focusing less on action and more on communication, trust, and adaptation. That slower approach likely worked against it commercially, in an era when science fiction audiences were often expecting faster pacing and larger spectacle. Still, the relationship between the two leads gave the story weight. Instead of treating the alien race as simple villains, the film explored cultural differences and mutual dependence in a way that stood apart from many genre releases of the time. The Boys Next Door followed two teenagers whose road trip spirals into violence and increasingly reckless behavior. Rather than presenting its characters as glamorous rebels,
So what do you want us to do, huh, Roy? Become computer programmers, maybe fly the space shuttle?
the film keeps a tense and uncomfortable atmosphere throughout. Charlie Sheen and Maxwell Caulfield play the central roles with a level of unpredictability that gives the movie much of its intensity. The film never became a major mainstream title. It avoids the cleaner structure of many crime thrillers, and instead feels unstable from beginning to end. That unpredictability became part of what later viewers remembered most about it. The movie captures a grim and restless energy that separated it from more commercial releases during that period.
This is my game, sucker.
The legend of Billie Jean followed a teenager who unexpectedly becomes a public symbol after going on the run with her brother following an act of self-defense.
Dead.
The movie blended youth rebellion, media attention, and small-town frustration into something that felt larger than its budget. Billie Jean quickly transforms from an ordinary teenager into a growing cultural figure within the story itself.
How do you know?
Because he's a fucker, that's how I know.
Helen Slater's performance gave the character a calm confidence that helped carry the movie, while the Texas setting added identity and atmosphere. Although it wasn't a major hit during release, the film stayed memorable because of its central idea, an average person accidentally becoming a symbol people rally around.
I thought it was awesome. Billie Jean went running up that escalator right there. This guy grabbed a hold of her backpack and she turned around and kicked him right in the nuts and kept on running. It was hilarious. Billie Jean, wherever you are, I love you. Mm-hmm.
Its visual style and soundtrack also helped it remain closely associated with the mid-1980s. Life Force is one of the strangest large-scale science fiction horror films of the decade. The movie begins with astronauts discovering mysterious humanoid beings hidden inside a spacecraft, then escalates into a full-scale supernatural disaster spreading across London.
Only presence I've ever encountered.
What makes the film stand out is how aggressively it commits to its own insanity. The story constantly expands, moving from science fiction to horror to apocalypse-level chaos. The visuals, practical effects, and sheer scale gave it an identity that was difficult to confuse with anything else released at the time. That same ambition may have also made it difficult for mainstream audiences to fully connect with during its original release. But for viewers drawn to unusual genre filmmaking, Life Force became memorable precisely because it refuses to play things safely.
These are the overlooked films of 1985 that weren't built around becoming massive cultural events.
Son of a bitch.
They existed slightly off-center from the movies that dominated the year, but that's often where hidden gems come from. Not from the loudest releases, but from the ones willing to take a different route. And decades later, those are often the movies people feel like they discovered for themselves.